Folks, thanks for tuning in today. And we say there's always news. I'm not kidding. Stay with us today because some of the stuff we're dealing with is absolutely just going to, as we say, blow your mind. So let's start out as we unfortunately do almost every day with the Epstein files, latest revelations. You'll know, our regular watchers and listeners will know that for some time I've been saying there needs to be more scrutiny from media on the files about things like the World Economic Forum and how Epstein was so incredibly involved there in media because for some reason they like protecting the Democrats that have been visiting Epstein. They haven't been wanting to cover it. So you saw today, the head of the entire World Economic Forum, the whole Davos situation, resigned over. First, he denied he had almost any contact with Epstein, and now all kinds of emails, and he has resigned. So this continues. Hillary Clinton was deposed yesterday and said she had no awareness of the illegal and pedophilia stuff that Epstein was involved in. Listen, I say in a democracy, you take people at their word until they're proven otherwise. There has been no allegation of criminal wrongdoing, so let's keep that in mind. Bill Clinton is on the stand today being deposed. What he will be saying in light of photographs where he's in the swimming pool and seen with girls and with Ghislaine Maxwell may be a little different, but again, make it clear there has been no allegation of actual criminal wrongdoing, so we'll continue to watch the Epstein files roll along. Well, in Canada, you'll see something that's gone international is the fact that Prime Minister Modi from India, who also took a huge delegation recently to Israel. It'd be nice to see if his interest and support for Israel will translate to Prime Minister Carney in Canada. But he has said about Canada, he has said, we will buy whatever you have. So here we have Prime Minister Modi, who has said, he's running panicked from the US. Okay, I understand that. And he's saying we need to expand now. Now will Prime Minister Carney do what he can to advance and enhance our natural gas, our liquid natural gas sales to India, because that would result in a reduction in overall global emissions because India still burns huge amounts of coal. They burn huge amounts of animal dung, which poisons the people of India. And will Prime Minister Carney now really stand up to the extreme environmentalists in Canada and work with the First Nations to show this would be positive for them? And here we've got open invitation now and a clear way to leap even ahead of the United States in terms of economics and in terms of lowering emissions. Will he do it? Let's keep an eye on that. In Quebec, they have what's called, and the viewers and watchers from the US and around the world, they've got something which is referred to as Bill 21. Now it's a law which prohibits religious symbols in public. I don't know if it's eventually going to mean churches are going to have to start taking their crosses down off their buildings, but it was first imposed just on very senior people within government. Now it is spread, and it's administrative offices and teachers in many different areas cannot wear religious symbols. Hundreds, if not thousands, of teachers now are without work. And mainly it's to do with people who wear the hijab. So some people say, well, that's good. We've got to clamp down on these Islamists. Well, okay, it's interesting to say that, but it also will include anybody who wants to wear a cross or somebody who wants to wear a kippah. And it's being seen as pretty extreme, but the Quebec government is sticking with it. We're even seeing now where persons with disabilities who have been being cared for by people, by women principally, who also are Muslim and who wear the hijab, now they are not being cared for. So it's going to raise the temperature. And they have used, in Quebec, they've used something called, we've talked about it before, the notwithstanding clause for viewers from other parts of maybe Canada or around the world. That's a clause that was put in way back in 1981 into the Canadian Constitution to bring all provinces into the Constitution, provinces being quite rightly worried about how judges sometimes overrule, not based on law, but based on their whims. And in some cases, the notwithstanding clause will give a province a 5-year reprieve on a law that they think is maybe unconstitutional or the judges have gone too far. So we'll see where it goes, but it's really picking up interest, picking up steam in Canada, this whole notion about banning religious items and religious visibility of clothing, etc. Well, out in British Columbia, Premier Eby has said no to a public inquiry on the heartbreaking, devastating killing in Tumbler Ridge by the biologically born male who was identifying as transgendered. And so people are up in arms, but I'm saying, wait a minute, he's not saying, and in defense of Premier Eby, and I hope my conservative friends don't get upset with me here, in defense of Eby, he is saying, yes, he wants the matter thoroughly investigated. The problem with public inquiries, oftentimes it gets the politicians off the hook. They announce a public inquiry. That means the elected representatives have to step back. Huge money has gone into finding somebody who's going to lead the inquiry and all of the processes. And often these public inquiries on any particular issue can sometimes drag on for years and then result in some recommendations that may or may not be applied. So I really think there is some merit in going at this right now, having the public investigation, and they must include the fact that the shooter was a minor. The shooter was under 19, and hopefully this will bring light to the danger of minors being altered either by chemicals, prescriptions, or by mutilative surgery. And hopefully that brings that discussion to light. We'll see what happens. It might even bring into focus Premier Danielle Smith, her law in Alberta, which says adults have the right to alter themselves any way they want, but kids, children, minors need to be protected. So let's see where that goes. Well, if you want an interesting outlook, and it's related to the world of Olympics, I would ask Canadians, how many of you remember a young star by the name of Callie Humphreys? Now, Callie Humphreys has set a record, only woman in the history of the world to win gold medals for two separate countries. I think that's pretty stunning, don't you? And yet people I'm talking to today and even yesterday and in the last several days, they've hardly heard of her. Well, here's part of the reason. So Callie Humphreys was born Canadian. And you might, now her last name now is Armbruster because she's got married, but basically she's known as Callie Humphreys. And she won gold for Canada in 2010 in the bobsleigh, which is a tough sport. She won it also in 2014. Then, among other things, for other reasons, she made a decision to start applying for citizenship in the U.S., which she was eventually granted. One of the things she talked about that was encouraging her to move to the U.S. was the fact that her coach, this is according to her, I'm not making the allegations, that there was physical and emotional abuse from the coaching that she was getting in Canada. And mainstream media has hardly touched that. Normally, when it's a case of abuse, physical or emotional, on a woman, the media, quite rightly, will champion that cause and really go after it. Hardly any discussion at all. She was granted her U.S. citizenship. So in 2022, she goes into the Olympics in Beijing, wins a gold again. 2026, this year, wins another medal. And so you say, well, why is media ignoring her? Well, she's committed one of the gravest sins a woman can commit. She is kind of a supporter of policies of President Trump. As a matter of fact, she's going to be on a committee following her retirement from the Olympics, and a committee looking at regulations to do with the Olympics. Now, it's been fascinating to see how the media have swarmed around and championed Eileen Gu, who at one time was a star for the U.S., and then she changed her citizenship and went to the Winter Olympics sports for China. She's gotten all kinds of attention and huge contracts from some of the major fashion brands. Now, it does happen that she's gorgeous, and I know that has an effect on advertisers, but very interesting that she gets all the attention, even though she switched allegiances, and Callie Humphreys, not so much. So let's see and let's watch as that story continues to roll on. I'm making a prediction relative to Iran and the buildup we're seeing. It's getting more and more every day with especially American resources in the region. And I'm going to go out on a limb and make a prediction that there will be a military intervention into Iran, largely by the U.S. I don't think you're going to see boots on the ground. I don't think President Trump is going to send soldiers in there. But I think you're going to see some increased aerial attacking on various installations in Iran. And the fact is, I think Trump realizes he can't ignore Iran. Iran is still firing missiles at Israel, for instance. And Trump knows that China is watching. If China sees the U.S. afraid to go after Iran, that's going to embolden them relative to their views on Taiwan. It's certainly going to embolden Putin, who's going to be saying, well, if he's not going to go after Iran, which is the leading exporter of terrorism in the world and possibly has nuclear capabilities, if the U.S. isn't afraid to go after Iran, they're sure not going to boost up attention to Ukraine. So there are geopolitical realities here that the rest of the world is looking at. That's one of the things, or a number of the things I think you are going to see a hit on Iran, largely from the U.S. There'll probably be some Israeli backing or involvement. When these large conflicts are taking all the news, it's easy to ignore the fact that Afghanistan has increased their attacks on Pakistan. Keep in mind that Pakistan, and it's really like if it wasn't for these other conflicts that are going on, this would be worldwide news. It's huge. And remember, Pakistan will only be pushed so far. They are a nuclear-equipped country, and very dangerous what's going on there. The added aggravation, of course, is Afghanistan forces have access to untold amount of equipment that was left by when President Biden did the ridiculously so-called emergency pullout of Afghanistan, leaving just thousands and thousands of military resources for the Afghan army. Let's watch and see where that's going to go, but it's definitely a potential spark that could ignite into something much further. Well, media are really going after something that happened in the White House. It's actually talking about gone nuclear. The U.S. men's hockey team, and let's face it, the Canadian-U.S. gold medal hockey Olympic was probably one of the best games we've ever seen. Fantastic what those young players treated the world audience to. And when they were in the White House, President Trump made an offhanded remark. He said, I've got to invite the women's team too. And he said, I'll probably get impeached for that. An offhanded remark, a mild joke. Mainstream media has gone berserk at the fact that even some of the U.S. players kind of chuckled that Trump would have said he could be impeached. It was a throwaway remark, and they're tracking down, they're using photos to see which hockey players even smiled a bit. It's insane how mainstream media has gone berserk, while at the same time they are ignoring our dear friend, and I say that carefully, Governor Gavin Newsom in California. His press secretary, again, is a guy by the name of Isaac Garden. He just released, in an email, he wasn't even trying to hide it, he got a request from a reporter saying, can you give us a little more detail about Gavin Newsom making the remark that he's like black people because he scores low on the ACT scores. And of course, that whole comment is hugely embarrassed and possibly hurt Gavin Newsom. And so his head of communications, Isaac Garden, fired off a written reply, and I won't say it it'll be beeped out, but it starts with F, and its two-word reply ends with off. So he told the woman reporter to F off. He recently, the Isaac Garden, this is the right-hand media person for Gavin Newsom, also was making a remark about Nicki Minaj. You'll know that Nicki Minaj, famous rapper, and hated by all of Hollywood and media because Nicki Minaj is a supporter of Trump. And in an email, again, he makes the reference both verbally and it's been written. Isaac Garden, this is Newsom's mouthpiece, called her a stupid hoe. Call a woman a stupid hoe. And almost zero reaction. So I'm saying that, folks, media have the right to report where they want, but if you are relying only on mainstream media, you're going to be intellectually impaired when you come to discussing these arguments. So I really encourage you to not just look at the usual suspects of mainstream media, but take your research a little further. Netflix has backed away from their purchase offer related to the Warner Brothers Paramount bid. Now, interesting, so that puts Paramount in a better position. Netflix shares went up when they backed away, but then so did Paramount. Paramount shares have also gone up because included in that deal, it's not just Paramount, but you've got HBO is included there, CNN, CBS, and it's very interesting to watch how media doesn't like it because, of course, the CEO of Paramount is a guy by the name of David Ellison, who happens to be the son of Larry Ellison, who is a friend of, yes, President Trump. Larry Ellison is the owner of the huge media outlet Oracle. And so this is really going to, Larry Ellison, by the way, owns 13% of TikTok also. And Larry Ellison has just recently announced he's moving from where? From Hawaii to where? To Florida. Many people moving to Florida as other states, and it's not because they're Democrat states, as other states raise their taxes, raise their regulatory regime, and become harder and harder to live in and more expensive, people will move. So all of that is getting interesting attention. Well, getting attention always, we feel badly for our friends in New York and some of the upstates of the United States with the tremendous snow they faced. Well, Mayor Mondami finally has believed maybe there is a time where you can contract services out because the snow is piled up everywhere. So he's offering $30 an hour for anybody who just wants to show up and shovel snow. I said to my wife, I'm thinking maybe do a weekend in New York, pay for the weekend by shoveling snow for several hours. Obviously, that didn't go over well. But people are not taking him up on that. People are not showing up, and some people are suggesting it's because the welfare schemes are so generous in New York that people are looking at $30 an hour for shoveling snow, or about the same amount for staying home. And guess what? As I would do if I had the choice, I'd probably stay home. And talking about snow, there was an incident yesterday where police officers were assaulted by large crowds firing snowballs. Mayor Mondami just laughed and said, haha, no big deal. It was just a snowball fight. You know, being a Canadian, I know what it's like to grow up, and I know what it's like to have snowball fights. Some of them can be fun. As our moms always used to tell us, don't throw snowballs. It could put out somebody's eye. And a couple of the officers did have to go to hospital. And this is an actual assault on police officers. Mondami says no big deal and no charges will be forthcoming. Well, in terms of what media reports and doesn't report, if I say the name Stacey Marie Lawton, a lot of you are going to scratch your heads and say, well, who's that? Well, Stacey Marie Lawton got huge, and I'm talking about global, worldwide support and recognition when Stacey Marie Lawton is a biologically born male who was for election in the state of New Hampshire for the state legislature some time ago, got elected. That went around the world. It was seen as just so fantastic. Coverage everywhere. And Stacey Marie Lawton, that transgendered, biologically born man, has now, the court cases have finished. He was charged and with a number of sexual offenses against kids. He did plead guilty to a number of those offenses, including sexual offenses against kids as young as 3 years old. And now his sentencing will be coming up probably this week. I can hardly find any coverage on that. I did a fact-based research today of Canadian media who really covered Stacey's election as a trans individual, the first one elected. Lots of coverage, and now hardly any. Again, if you are relying on mainstream media, you are often not even getting half of the news. You will be intellectually impaired trying to discuss these things. Well, that's also important. I've been telling people, I kind of laugh at this. I even checked when I was doing my search on this with Chat, GBT and Claude. And when I first put the thing out to Chat gave me a bio on Stacey Marie Lawton and said that she was the first elected trans candidate. Not a word about the convictions. And this is just Chat GBT. So I pushed Chat on it and Chat said, oh, well, yeah, okay, there's that too. It sounds crazy, but we need to be informing Chat. We need to be informing Claude or whichever AI you use about these things that will make an effect. They will start to include this, but if we don't, it's almost like trying to inform a politician. I know it sounds strange, but you got to keep AI informed also. Well, The war on fraud in spending just got a boost in the U.S. And here's another prediction I'm making, because fraud is now seen, by going after fraud, it's seen to be in the billions of dollars. It's not just in the U.S. You're going to see it in Canada. You're going to see it in other governments. Because when auditors come in, as they do every year, and audit the books of a government, listen, audit firms, especially these big ones, they don't want to lose the contract. Now, I'm not saying they don't follow the facts and they don't do good audits. They do, but they simply do the audit and they'll say, okay, on this social program was $10 million spent. That's in many cases the extent of the audit. And they say, yes, it was spent, but a forensic audit goes further. They'll go to the actual place. They'll want to see what was spent. They'll want to see who got paid for doing what. And as these forensic audits have increased in the U.S., fraud across the board in all states and at the federal level is in the billions. And so there's a special department now, Department of Fraud. I think you're going to see this, a little prediction of mine, also go to other jurisdictions, Canada for sure. And this covers municipalities, provinces, and at the federal level. Well, in California, which always seems to be a trend setter, people are mad in Kern County, California, because the council there has said nobody is allowed to feed cats anymore. If you see those kitty cats wandering around, you're not allowed. It's against the law to feed them, and people have gone berserk. They've also passed laws saying you can't do surgery on a cat if it means altering them. That means, quite literally, you can't do surgery on a cat to, you know how some cats get so-called declawed. No longer can you do that. That mutilation, and you can't even use prescriptions on a cat that would alter it. Kind of interesting that there'd be a law against doing surgery on little kittens, but no law on little kids, but I'll leave that to others to debate. But here's what happened. One woman then who led the charge against this law on feeding cats, she was so emotional at the microphone that the Kern County, the head of the Kern County committee said, you know what, we are so moved by your testimony, we are going to create a special committee just to look at how we actually can be allowed to keep on feeding those cats. So just a word to you citizens out there, if you've got issues and you want to take them to City Hall, don't just rage and scream and be mad. Try a little tear jerk. Try to warm the hearts. I don't know what they're going to call that committee. I'm suggesting they call it the Kitty Committee, but we'll see where that goes. Well, Prime Minister Carney in Canada was noted at the United Nations because he quoted Thucydides. Thucydides was a Greek, not only a philosopher, but actually a general. And he got a lot of commentary, Prime Minister Carney did, because he's so intellectual that he would quote such an auspicious Greek philosopher. And now the opposition leader in Canada, Pierre Poilievre, has come out and he's quoting the Roman emperor Marcus Aurelius. Marcus Aurelius, quite famous in history because he's called the last of the 5 good emperors, very strong and protective of Rome. One thing to keep in mind when you're looking at this too, Marcus Aurelius is called a Stoic. That means his he made famous the whole the school of Stoicism, where he says you look calmly at a situation. Your strength of mind will come from being calm. When it came to Athens being attacked by Sparta, Thucydides was the emperor at the time. He lost. Some people say he panicked. You can interpret the history, but he lost. When Marcus Aurelius was emperor in Rome and he was being attacked by all kinds of forces, he won. So I'm kind of leaning to what Pierre Poilievre is leaning to. I'm going with the guy who was the winner. I'm going with the guy who calmly looked at the situation, and he's even, Poilievre is saying, look, we don't like what these policies from President Trump, but we have long-term, 100-year, more than 200-year relationship with the United States. We've got good friends there. We've got great business opportunities unlike anybody in the world. And so he's saying, look, let's keep our heads. Let's take a stoic approach. Rudyard Kipling talking about keeping your head when all about you, everybody around you is losing theirs. Many Canadians losing their heads over what's happening in the U.S. Let's be calm, let's be strong, and let's find the pathway to victory, as Marcus Aurelius did, and not Thucydides, who lost to the attackers. Have a good day, folks. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow.